There is some irony, and more than a few of my colleagues have pointed this out on social media. There is some irony in having this reading from Matthew on tonight of all nights. When I was a kid, I grew up in First Congregational United Church of Christ in Platteville, Wisconsin. And to the best of my knowledge, we did not have an Ash Wednesday service. I did not know what Ash Wednesday was. I had never heard of the thing, even though other churches had Ash Wednesday services. I knew that in class on some Wednesday in late winter or early spring, some of my classmates would show up with stuff smeared on their foreheads for first period. And I learned, after a while, that they were Catholic or Lutheran. And they had gone to their worship services in the morning, dragged out of bed by their parents to go to church before school, to have ashes put in the shape of a cross on their forehead, some with the modern twist, some with low toner, and to be reminded of their mortality. But I didn't do that. I got to, as it were, sleep in and not go to church before school. Because historically, and for hundreds of years, for generations, churches like ours in the Reformed tradition did not celebrate Ash Wednesday. Some of you grew up in churches that did not celebrate Ash Wednesday. And the reason was that Reformed churches had this thing called the regulatory rule of worship. And it meant that if something was not spelled out explicitly in the New Testament, we were not gonna do it. There are still churches in the Reformed tradition that do not celebrate Ash Wednesday. There are sites on the interwebs where people in the Reformed tradition will tell you why it is terrible to celebrate Ash Wednesday and Maundy Thursday and Good Friday and really all of Lent and most of Advent. There was a time when Congregationalists did not celebrate Christmas. There was a time, in fact, when we outlawed the celebration of Christmas, because nowhere in the New Testament does anybody celebrate Christmas. Sometimes we get a little hung up on some rules. We try to make something hard and fast and say, this is the way it should be done. There is no other way. Every other way is suspicious or evil or somehow a manifestation of the powers of sin and death and everything that makes life less. But somewhere along the line, somewhere in the mid to late 20th century, there was this move to bring Christian worship a little bit more together, to borrow from each other, and sometimes outright steal from each other, and to look back to those old traditions that maybe weren't so much found explicitly stated in the New Testament or anywhere in Scripture, but that still could mean something. Because it turned out that this thing, These things that we were suspicious of, that we thought might be vehicles of the powers of sin and death and everything that makes life less, could also just as well be vehicles of grace. And so we started trying it. And by the time I was in seminary, it was not uncommon for those of us in Reformed traditions who did not grow up with Ash Wednesday to go get some ashes smeared on our forehead and to be reminded of our mortality. Because there is, in fact, something useful in that. And there is, in fact, something useful in taking a season to be mindful of who we are and what we are made of, and who we are made by and whose image we bear. Remember, O mortal, that you are dust. Remember, O mortal, that you are made in the image of God, and that just as you one day will be laid in a tomb, so too shall God, who comes into the world as one of us, to bear those burdens that we bear, to be human just like us. But we still have to deal with Matthew. And what Matthew is saying, what Jesus is saying in Matthew, is true. It is easy to put on a version of our faith that is showy, that is about being seen. I know because I've been there. I know because I've seen it. I know because I've been a part of it. I know because I've seen the folks who fast and who make a point of telling you that they are fasting. I've seen the folks who pray and want to make sure that everybody else in the restaurant knows that they are praying. I've seen the folks who sit with Scripture in open areas, highly visible, giant Bibles, so that everyone can see that they are reading and what they are reading. I know some folks who give for the sake of being congratulated on their giving. And there is something wrong with that. I mean, I'm not going to criticize anyone for fasting if they are called to fast, or for praying if they are called to pray, or for reading Scripture if they are called to read Scripture, or for giving if they are called to give, but if we are only doing it so that people will see us doing it, if we are only doing it so that people will congratulate us for doing it, even if we are only doing it so that people will say, that's a serious Christian there. I should go to their church. I should be part of their team. I should be involved with them. They put on a good show. Then we are, believe it or not, doing it for the wrong reasons. And doing it for the wrong reasons, it becomes hollow. If you're just fasting to be seen fasting, then you're just hungry. If you're just praying to be seen praying, then you're just talking. If you're just reading Scripture to be seen reading Scripture, then you're just reading. If you're just giving to be seen giving, you're just making yourself poorer. And that's not necessarily the worst thing all the time. I want to be fair here. I want to be kind here. I want to be gracious here. But there is so much more to it, to this thing, to this season and to this life. we do not get ashes to be seen, having gotten ashes. We do not receive ashes so that people will ask, "What's on your forehead?" We do not receive ashes so that we can tell people why we received ashes. We receive ashes to remember whose we are, who made us, whose image we bear. We can do that without ashes. We can do that washing our face right afterwards. We can do that without anybody else knowing, and it would still remind us of who we are, what we are made of, whose image we bear. We can fast with oil on our face, with gladness radiating out of us, and gain the benefits of going without. We can pray in secret and silently, and still be heard by the God who is love. We can read, having hidden our Bible in a copy of Mad Magazine, and gain knowledge and insight from the Scriptures. We can give anonymously and without anyone knowing, and be making a gift to God, who needs nothing and who will repay abundantly when we are in need. I do need to be clear about something. Jesus is not criticizing any of those things. Jesus is not criticizing fasting. Everyone around him fasted. Jesus is not criticizing praying. Everyone around him prays. Jesus is not criticizing reading Scripture. Everyone around him reads Scripture. Jesus is not criticizing giving. Everyone around him gives. It is what everybody does. The problem is not the act, it is the reason behind the act. And so I am telling you this. As we go out tonight, having received these ashes, as we go through Lent, practicing our faith, watch the reason. If we are doing it to be seen, well, then we're just being seen doing it. We're just putting on a show. And the prophets have things to say about putting on shows and how God feels about shows. But if instead we are taking this season to turn our hearts toward God, to remember what we are made of and whose image we are made in, well, then some folks might see us and be amazed. Some folks might see us and be judgmental. Some folks might not see us at all. And we will still benefit from the work that we are doing. For this is the work of Lent. This is, dare I say it, the work of Christian life. This is the work of Christian discipleship. This is the work that we are called to do. Not simply to be seen, but to abide in the God who makes us, to abide in the God who gives us life, to abide in the God who is love. And yes, people might see us do that. And yes, that might be wonderful. But that is not the reason. The reason is that we might enjoy those benefits that God offers, the life that God offers, the love that God offers, the reign of love that God is calling us into even now. So go through this season not worrying about what people see, not worrying about what people say, not worrying about what people think. Go through this season, your mind focused on God. And when we arrive at the end of this season, our minds focused on God, our hearts focused on God, our lives focused on God. What a wonderful new thing we will see that God is doing.